I want to thank Professor Kwang for inviting me here. Today's topic is about animals because I have two books just out of the printer early this year, about half a year ago actually. This is one. I give this one to Professor Kwang.
Thank you. So that's my benefit.
Yeah, your benefit.
Thank you. And I will show a cover of this to you later.
Yeah, this is a cover of my two books. I used to work on the Silk Road studies, especially focusing on the religious manuscripts, the fragments in various languages from Central Asia and also China. But I focus on history and religions, especially Christianity and Buddhism. Professor Kwang focused on art and literature. So we have some overlap. But in the past 10 years or so, maybe, a little bit longer, maybe, I focus on my study on especially animals, environment, and also religions. Basically, like how different religions treat animals, how they understand animals, how they talk about animals, and how they use the animals in their life, not ethically, but also like artistic and other reflections, whatever. So I talk about a very particular animal today, parrot. It's from chapter 6 of my book on the left side. You probably know one of the most celebrated animals in the international relations today, especially between China and other countries. What animal is the most famous as a gift presented by Chinese government to other countries? Yes?
Panda?
Yes, exactly. Panda certainly is very famous because I would say it's kind of like a tragedy for the human society, to present so-called exotic animal as a gift, to other countries. Because especially for today, for contemporary politics. But if we look at history, we know it has a long, it was a long tradition in pre-modern society. Like many other animals were often presented as a political gifts or tribute, from one country to another. For example, in the past, I know giraffe was presented to the Chinese Empire. Then Chinese Empire also presented animals to Korea, Japan. Parrot, for example, was one of the most common animals, exotic animals presented as a gift to Japan. If you look at the East Asian literature, you see a lot of poems actually dedicated to these so-called animal gifts. And some other animals like lion. Lion was also an exotic animal. We know only indigenous animals in South Asia and Africa. Asiatic lion or African lion. Other countries, other regions, we don't have lion. So lion was often presented by Persian Empire and other states, small kingdoms in Central Asia to China. So we also see a lot of poems, literary pieces on lions. When a lion arrived in China or other places, then literati just get together and then they compose the poems as kind of tribute. And elephant was also kind of presented to other countries, from Southeast Asia. But elephant was also regarded as an exotic animal in the past. So what I'm saying is that in the in medieval period, in pre-modern culture, animals often served as sort of gift for the human society anyway. So I talk about this particular animal because parrot was very interesting. We can find it that this animal actually played so many different roles in different aspects of human society in East Asia, especially in literature, art, religion, and also history. I used probably just one literary piece talking about how this animal was interpreted in different ways in especially medieval Chinese society. I'm talking about medieval society, referring to 6th century, 7th century, 8th century, maybe 9th century, maybe different from medieval Europe, but it's kind of like what we understand medieval Asia. Anyway, so here, as I said, I pretty much turned my focus to animal studies or animal history or Asian animals. When we talk about like animals, certainly scholars actually studied animals for a long time from various perspectives, like animal history or science, technology, and society. But for the recent scholarship, I think we have a new field, kind of like growing up. We call it animal studies, because in the past we probably study like we call it real animals or animals in the natural environment, non-human animals. But animal studies, like scholars from humanities disciplines, philosophy, literature, religious studies, art history, we also studied animals in our imagination or created by humans, or not real animals. We can't find them anywhere in environment, in nature. For example, of course, you guys watch the movie Lord of the Rings or Aveda. You see a lot of animals actually. We can't see them in our society, in our life. They are created by artists or by imagination. So here, animals actually appeared in our many different experiences, psychological experience, of course, physical experience, historical experience, or cultural experience, right? Some animals I never saw them, I never met them from Arctic or very remote regions. I never saw, even from China. I might not able to see these animals or even met them in my entire life. But I know about them from reading literature, from seeing like art, that kind of thing. Also religious experience. Basically means like, the monks or the priests, religious priests often talk about how they convert animals. But certainly this is kind of more like a religious experience. It's very different from our daily experience, like non-religious experience. Anyway, so here I basically categorize like 5 relations between humans and animals. I call it 5 C's. Easier to remember. Anyway, connections, confrontations, conflicts, compromises, and competitions. Humans and animals nowadays, why I study this, I told my children, okay, in the future, maybe you guys can see less animals than I ever did, because animals, the species, kind of like in decline. I think a lot of people are aware of that, right? Our future generation, they will see, less animals. There's so much pollution. I think, at least in my country. I was from China originally, 20 years ago. So I remember when I was a kid, I see a lot of animals actually in my environment. But nowadays I go back, I see the pond, no fish there, or even those fish. You see that you know the fish was kind of like poisoned, sort of. Anyway. Confrontation, because the human population grow up, I think we kind of like march to a lot of space and pretty much kind of suppressed the space of animals. Of course, like the tiger. Tiger must have a huge, maybe 100 square mile for a couple of tigers to live. So if you invade this kind of space, then you might confront with a tiger. I have a lot of chapters actually discussing the confrontations and also conflict between tigers and the humans in my book anyway. So and the compromises, of course, sometimes we also have compromises. You probably know a lot of stories about like how humans, confront or encounter a bear, for example, in Canada or somewhere in United States. Then there was sort of like compromise. Humans kind of withdraw, and then bears also withdraw. They don't kind of like confront anyway. So that kind of, and also competition. There are lots of competitions, humans and animals, for space and whatever. Here, how we studied animals. Here also I lay out some sort of like perspectives. How we understand animals. Regional perspective. The animals live in different regions. I think different regions have different kind of like natural environment, climate, and also water, mountains, and stuff like that. We need this kind of like physical materials for this life of animals, and also textual perspective. We study texts. Animals don't write. Animals do not have texts. So we study animals actually by reading texts. But for religious studies, we have so-called canonical materials and also local materials. Canonical materials basically means the materials compiled by religious priests. Canonized texts, but local texts basically means locally produced texts, like gazetteers, produced by people here in Arizona, or in Florida. Professor Kwang is a folklorist, so you guys also, write about maybe animal life in Florida, so stuff like that, and also the relations between humans and animals, and the society and the nature, and also central and the local. Basically means, especially in pre-modern society, like in China. China was a huge empire. So there's the lions, for example, or giraffe, parrot, stuff like that. Exotic animals can be only found in the court, because the court will receive the gifts from other states like Persia, India, Burma, Vietnam, Korea and Japan, and then Chinese Empire also gave the animals to these states. It's kind of like different regions anyway, and also traditional values and modern consciousness. Often when we study animals, we use the modern consciousness to talk about animals. For example, like bioethics. I would say animal protection, environmentalism. Was pretty much regarded as a modern concept in the past, in pre-modern society. Of course, religions, Buddhism or Jainism, they would talk about like non-violence or this kind of stuff. But still, was very strong kind of anthropocentric thinking. They might for spiritual cultivation, that kind of thing. It's very different from modern concept of environmentalism. I would say, including Buddhism. When you talk about Buddhist protection, I can tell you that I studied Buddhism for 30 years. So Buddhism is very anthropocentric, just for your own meditation, your own spiritual purification, that kind of thing. Still, modern society is very different. We have very different understanding anyway. So and also. Again, as I said, modern society, we often talk about like protecting, animals, that kind of thing, or treat animals like equal as like humans or minority groups or underrepresented groups, whatever. But still, there are a lot of animal studies scholars think about, or they ask a question: if animal can be regarded as an ethical agent or moral agent, do animals have consciousness of like morality or ethics in the sense of like human understanding? But in Buddhism, of course, it's not an issue because animals were regarded as sentient beings. I can show you this kind of very typical Buddhist cosmology. It's called the wheel of transmigration, or the wheel of life and death. This is from Sichuan province in southwest China. We go to detail. You can find in Buddhist cosmology, there are 6 kinds of, we call the sentient beings. Basically means these sentient beings or life forms can reincarnate. Can reincarnate all the time. There was no the end of like absolute death or terminal end of life. When one life form died, then he or she, whatever, it will be reincarnated in a different form. So no one has one life. Everyone has multiple lives. So in Buddhism, there are 6 realms of sentient beings, and there are 3 upper, we call the upper realms, and the 3 lower realms. So if someone has more merit or we call it good karma in his life, he will be reborn in the upper realm. Devas means like heavenly beings, and Ashura means like warrior fighters. Those people often argue with others, conquers people. And the humans. And the lower realm, including like realm of animals, realm of hell beings, and the realm of hungry ghosts. Hell being certainly is the most miserable being. It basically means they committed like huge crime, genocide, stuff like that, and they will go to hell. But often animals basically means probably someone ate too much meat, harm too many lives. They'll probably reincarnate as animal, and this guy will be hunted all the time in his entire life. But that's bad, right? But anyone can can be upgraded in the next life if this guy is doing good things. So it's kind of Buddhist cosmology. So in this sense, animal is not different from human. They are also, they are kind of like a moral agent. They can do good things, they can do bad things. This is a Buddhist cosmology anyway. And the outer ring is 12 zodiac animals. You probably heard about that. Like in China, some other Asian countries, they use the animals to count the calendar. Like this year is the year of whatever. I don't remember, but I was born in the year of tiger, so I was supposed to have some quality of tiger, that kind of thing, like brave and take responsibility, that kind of stuff. Anyway, but you will know if you learn more about like zodiac thing. Anyway, this is an animal realm. So you see, these animals actually they are reincarnations of like previous lives. So everyone has multiple lives if you do good things, and also you might meet different whatever partners in your next life. Who knows? But if you meet your previous life partner, then basically means you guys have probably really kind of like connection. And also like in Tibetan Buddhism, there are lamas. They call the lamas. The Dalai Lama, for example, he was a reincarnation of the previous lama. So kind of like there are a lot of reincarnation. When the current lama passed away, so his followers will find another lama, kind of to succeed him. It's kind of like reincarnation. So there is no end. Anyway, so I show you some pictures, and you'll see humans actually were depicted in many different roles in human lives. This one, for example, from Dunhuang. Professor Kwang knows this very well. The art from northwestern city of China called Dunhuang. There are huge. There are a lot of like caves and a lot of murals. A lot of wall paintings were preserved. So through these wall paintings, we can see how pre-modern society, how people lived. Here you can see a farmer. I kind of like use animal, for labor. And this one also from the mural is a lion-colored deer as a Buddha's previous life in Buddhist Jataka stories. Well, in Buddhism, there are a lot of stories were developed, composed, talking about Buddha's previous lives. When Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, reached enlightenment, basically means, which means he will not reincarnate. in early Buddhism. But of course, in other traditions, they will say, okay, Buddha is transcendent. He can reincarnate whatever form. He can be here right now, like ant, whatever, Batman, you name it. So that kind of thing. So, but in this story, he was depicted as a 9-color deer, and he sacrificed himself. He submitted himself to a hunter. So the hunter brought him to the king, so the king would not kill the hunter. So this story kind of talks about, okay, this Buddha actually sacrificed himself in the form of a 9-color deer to save the life of the hunter. This kind of story, it's for kind of like preaching Buddhism. And this one also, how animals were used for kind of like defending Buddhism. It is seen showing Buddhist kind of like knowledge, talking about, two animals fought with each other. They represent different kind of like religious traditions. One is Buddhism, and the other is kind of the enemy of Buddhism. So lion certainly is Buddhism. Buddhism is strong, powerful, and it can sort of like conquer other so-called heretic traditions in South Asia, sort of. Not particularly Brahmanism, but perhaps other philosophical traditions that who challenged Buddhism anyway. And what earlier I said, in human experience, we have different sense of like animals in our life. When I read a lot of stories about the conflicts between humans and tigers in the medieval sources, and I was often asked, how do you know these stories are real or not? I don't know, basically. But we can find a visual, kind of like also visual material that pretty much supplement the textual sources. So we know in this painting kind of showing a tiger is kind of like pursuing a Buddhist whatever practitioner probably in the medieval period. And another painting showing that when a Buddhist monk was doing meditation alone in the mountain, and he was surrounded by the beasts, various beasts, tigers, snake, and white dogs, and whatever, leopard. It can be real, it can not be real, but we know a lot of like Buddhist monks actually lived in the mountains for doing meditation, right? Practice alone. Or Christian, even a Christian hermit. And it can be real. You are surrounded by a group or a pack of beasts. Can be dangerous. Even these stories often said, okay, if you recite a particular Buddhist scripture or mantra, they call it true words, magic spell, you can survive. You can try, but I won't try. But it shows that the threat probably was real. The threat probably was imminent. And then this is another one. It's the cover of my book. So even not just monks or priests, but also maybe like lay people. If you want to hide yourself in the mountain for doing meditation, it can be dangerous. There are a lot of like scorpion and whatever. But on the other hand, think about if you read a lot of like Buddhist texts, you might think about it could be the imagination of a Buddhist practitioner. Basically means these animals actually symbolize different challenges a practitioner can face. If you watch Keanu Reeves movie called The Little Buddha, you might know that when the Buddha was doing meditation and he was attacked by like the devil king and or a lot of temptations, like women or hunger and enemy, whatever, or beasts. So these animals may symbolize many different challenges when a practitioner can face in the mountain or in the forest. I think this is very, very important, even for you guys. In your entire life journey, you have a lot of challenges. These challenges can be depicted as these animals. They will often challenge you. But you have to overcome them. So this is what the Buddhism taught. You have to overcome all the difficulties in your life, and you can reach enlightenment. and you have some kind of like abilities in your life. That kind of thing. Anyway, and also Buddhism developed a discourse called a tiger taming monk, or arahat. The Buddhist saint. If you do meditation, if you cultivate yourself, you practice like spiritual kind of like enhancement, that kind of thing, or purification. You can tame animals. You can tame beasts. But only saints. I think normal monks cannot do it. Only like so-called eminent monks or Buddhist saints can do it. So this one is from Taiwan, and this one is from Tibetan Buddhism. Also the similar idea. If you are very strong, you can tame beasts. You can get along with them. You won't get hurt. Get harmed by these animals. This is from contemporary Taiwan, from the Buddha's Light Mountain, Foguangshan. Anyway, this again, parrot. This is certainly a modern painting depicts the Buddhist cosmology. And this guy is called Mara King. The head of the evil dark force, sort of like Soren. So he kind of grasped every aspect of life, and then all these sentient beings from all 6 realms will have to pass his judgment, kind of, from the Buddhist perspective. Then he will decide which one will go to another realm, that kind of thing. Anyway, and parrot can speak. So this is a very different, and so it can, can kind of like imitate humans' language anyway. And in contemporary United States, parrot also served as an intelligent witness in a legal case. There is a story talking about how a parrot actually was used, for the court as a witness, the case of murder. When I read this story, I actually immediately recall a story from China in the medieval period. Very similar case. A wife kind of like had an affair with a neighbor, and the neighbor and the wife ended up killed the husband for taking the wealth. Of course, this is pretty much against women. It's from medieval period. And then emperor was ordered to investigate this case, and the parrot in his family was brought as a witness to kind of like clear, to offer the information. And so this parrot got a biography, by the prime minister in the Chinese Empire. It happened in the 9th century probably. So it's very similar to the contemporary case in the United States, because the parrot can speak anyway. And also there are various parrots. But when I look at this case and also other interesting sources, I find it's very interesting because a parrot was not indigenous in China. It was sort of like an exotic animal imported from other countries, other regions, from South Asia and also Southeast Asia. In China, there was a parrot, but not as beautiful as like the tribute parrot offered by other regions. Anyway, and also when I read the Buddhist materials, I find Buddhists really favor this animal. In Buddhist texts, there are a lot of records about this animal, and also you can see the overall the image of the parrot was pretty positive. But of course, sometimes there are also some sort of like records talking about parrots in a sort of like a negative way. But mostly, parrot was regarded as a sort of like positive animal. So anyway, here, and when we talk about Buddhism, Buddhism has a long history. We know that 2,500 years. It's long, very long history. So we divided into three stages of Buddhism: early Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, and East Asian Buddhism. because Buddhism was spread from South Asia to Central Asia, China, and then East Asia, China, Japan, Korea, and then Southeast Asia, right? From Sri Lanka to Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. Anyway, so in early Buddhism, parrot was probably just one species in animal realm, not much different from other animals, because animals are inferior to humans. So parrot certainly was inferior reincarnation of a human. But Mahayana Buddhism very different. Parrot can be the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means Buddhist saint, reached enlightenment, but not as high as the Buddha, but kind of like inferior to the Buddha, but much higher than humans, or even than Arhat, than other Buddhist saints. It's kind of like the PhD candidate. Buddha is kind of like PhD. Bodhisattva is like a PhD candidate, or BA. Like you guys might be BA, but right now you're a BA candidate, sort of. Anyway. So this guy is kind of like regarded as Bodhisattva. So Bodhisattva has two characters, like righteousness and also compassion. Only a sentient being, equipped with this kind of two kind of like qualities can reach enlightenment eventually. So Buddhism, of course, is kind of like Buddhist core values, righteousness or compassion, wisdom also. Anyway, so. And in Chinese Buddhism, certainly this idea actually was mixed with Chinese idea of Chinese sages or sage kings, like the so-called wise rulers. In Chinese civilization, the rulers often, especially the ancient rulers, often depicted as wise sages. It's pretty much like founding fathers in this country. They're not perfect, but I think they were pretty much portrayed as like great founding fathers, right? They're great people, basically. But in China, it's kind of same. I think maybe in many other cultures, there are kind of very similar trend like this, portraying like founding fathers or the founder of the ancient civilization, as great people. Of course, I think they did very good things, very great things. We can't deny that. But whatever, we can see on the Silk Road. I'm showing you that when we talk about this kind of parrot, we have multilingual sources talking about this, especially in Buddhism. Buddhism is huge. It's kind of huge religion, long history, and across right now it's across the entire globe. And in the past, especially in Central Asia, there are so many different fragments of manuscripts, Buddhist texts discovered by archaeologists, especially in the late 19th century, early 20th century. The European explorers, travelers, also probably military officers, intelligence officers, they went to Central Asia, and they discovered a lot of manuscripts. This is what I used to work on in various different languages, including a lot of like dead languages. They're no longer used for 1,000 years, only were discovered in the desert. So this one is Sogdian manuscript, but from Dunhuang, from northwest city of China. It's called the Shuka Sutra, but Shuka actually is a Sanskrit word, or means the parrot. So this sutra actually depicts the parrot. So, but it was not translated from Sanskrit. It was translated from Chinese, because Sogdians actually translated a lot of texts from Chinese into Sogdians. Anyway, so this is a very interesting text because we never know it before. It was probably from, not sure, maybe 9th century, 10th century, around that period, more than 1,000 years. This is a real piece from more than 1,000 years ago. It's like that, it's like Dead Sea Scrolls, but it's very rare. It's a fragment, not a complete manuscript. So, but we know this text, existed in the history, and it talks about like the virtue of the parrot. Okay, Chinese Buddhism is very different. Chinese Buddhism actually, as I said, in early Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, parrot was like very good, can be the Bodhisattva, but never as a Buddha. But in Chinese Buddhism, actually, parrot was regarded as kind of like similar to Buddha, or same as a Buddha, like reached enlightenment, complete enlightenment. So I used one text to talk about this issue in my book. I won't go to a lot of details. I guess you guys probably have an idea because it's a very short Chinese text. But what I'm saying is that even it's a very short Chinese text, we can reveal, many different implications in this text. I'm talking about here is a text called the Record of a Stupa for parrot relics in the Sichuan area. So this parrot actually was from the Sichuan area. It's part of China, Chinese Empire in the medieval period. And this parrot died, actually. And so these parrots were cremated. And according to Buddhist tradition, the Buddhist saints would be cremated, and after cremation, and the followers will find the relics from the bones of the saints, like the Buddha. Buddha remained like left the bones, the kind of relics. They call it relics, but basically from his bones or teeth or whatever. And this kind of stuff are like the bones of the saints in Europe, in medieval Europe, and they were venerated by the followers, by the Buddhists. So the various relics, and also in Buddhist tradition, only those people who reached so-called enlightenment may leave these relics. The common people can, just ash. But for these people, they are relics. Like today, if you go to South Asia, China, East Asia, China, Korea, whatever, Southeast Asia, especially Thailand, Burma, some like huge temples actually often claim they have the relics of the Buddha from India, from South Asia, because there was a legend in early Buddhism. When Buddha passed away and he was cremated, then his relics were distributed by the king to all over the world. So every place, if the people claim that, okay, we discovered the relics of the Buddha, then they will construct a huge pagoda, a stupa, kind of like a huge building, a sacred building for housing these relics. So the pilgrims will go to there and pay kind of like tribute, to this kind of like the relics of the Buddha. Well, like the Lincoln Memorial Hall or stuff like that. But of course, in Chan Buddhism, in Zen Buddhism, you guys know they mummified their masters. They don't cremated them. They don't use the relics, but they don't worship the relics, but they worship the mummies, sort of like of the Zen masters, like in Japan. But this is very similar, kind of similar idea. Anyway, so here clearly, it says that this parrot was cremated, and it left like relics. It's very unusual, anyway. So, this high-ranking military and military official in the Chinese Empire actually composed a piece, kind of like in memory of commemorative piece in memory of this parrot because it's very unusual. Anyway. This guy called Wei Gao, he was a high-ranking official because he was also a kind of devoted Buddhist. I think he basically used this piece to preach Buddhism, of course, right? But his piece can be interpreted in many different ways, and we can see how he linked the Buddhist idea with the Chinese idea. So what I'm saying is that in the medieval period, Buddhism was sort of like imported religion from South Asia. So in China, still a lot of people think why should we accept it? Like today, a lot of people will talk about why we should accept like Christianity. Christianity is kind of like foreign religion, but in the medieval period, Buddhism faced the same challenge. Of course, nowadays, no one would say Buddhism was not part of Chinese culture. Buddhism is a part of Chinese culture today. It's in China for 2,000 years already. Like Vietnam, right, Thailand, no one will question, okay, this is a foreign religion, we should not accept it. Tibet, same. Tibet even less, it's much younger Buddhism there. So something like that. But in medieval period, in the 8th century, 9th century, certainly there was a challenge. Especially this challenge was brought up by the dominant state ideology followers like Confucianism or Taoism, the indigenous Chinese religion, whatever. Anyway, so I just show you a couple of sentences from his writing. He said, this piece said, the parrot was a bird from the western regions and was endowed with beauty and the capacity for speech. So this is why it was important. Number one, it was from western regions. In medieval China, western regions basically refer to any region beyond the western border of the Chinese Empire, like Central Asia, Afghanistan, Persia, Iran, Mesopotamia, Iraq, Syria, or Palestine, and also India, Pakistan, all these areas called the Western regions. And basically means this parrot was from the same place where the Buddha was born. Right? Buddha was born in South Asia. And this guy has beauty and also capacity of speech. So parrot was beautiful. And also it can speak. So it's very interesting. And also then he talked about some other things and mentioning some kind of very traditional Chinese concepts like 5 elemental energies. In Chinese cosmology, basically the entire physical realm, our physical world, was constructed by 5 elements in the Chinese cosmology: wood, fire, whatever, water. You already know that. Metal. What else? Earth, right? But in India, there are 4 elements, right? Earth, fire, water, wind. I mean, our physical world, physical universe. So different cultures have different kind of understanding of the physical world. So anyway, so he mentioned this kind of thing, and then he also talked about the color, whatever. So basically, we can see that he was trying to mix both the Chinese ideas and the Buddhist ideas, and then try to portray this parrot as an enlightened Buddhist being, sentient being, whatever. And we can look at this piece from multiple perspectives, like literary, historical, and intellectual, religious perspectives. So we can see the gap between the description about the parrot in this piece, and also what a parrot was regarded in the historical context in the 9th century, in the 10th century. Okay, literary tradition. I don't go to details because he used a lot of allusions. He was this guy. He was a military officer. He's a high-ranking government official, but he was very familiar with Chinese classics, classic literature, or Confucian classics. So he can use all these resources. Like today, we compose a piece. We might cite the papers of the whatever founding fathers or Shakespeare, Plato, whatever, Socrates, whatever you name it. So this guy is the same. He cited a lot of allusions, but he actually cited these allusions, actually pieces from the ancient texts for a particular purpose. I show you a little bit later. He actually he had a secret life before he became kind of like high-ranking official, and he pretty much kind of linked his personal life experience with these stories he implied in this piece. And he was certainly a very devoted Buddhist, and especially in Chan tradition, he followed the Chan or Zen. We call it Zen. In Chinese, we call it Chan. In Japanese, we call it Zen. He followed the Zen Buddhist master, studied meditation, and he also supported a lot of projects, like constructing Buddhist temples, giant Buddhas, that kind of thing. And also he composed a lot of inscriptions, like commemorative pieces for Buddhist community. Basically, he is a big patron of the local Buddhist community. I can show you some pieces here. This is one of the pieces he composed. So he's like a very educated military officer, but certainly he gained his kind of like a reputation by fighting for the Chinese Empire against the Tibetan Empire and also Southwestern Kingdom. This is a giant Buddha he supported in construction. It's called the giant Buddha in Leshan in southwest China in Sichuan province. It's huge. Of course, it's a World Cultural Heritage Site. UNESCO, I guess maybe not UNESCO Heritage Site, maybe not.
I think it is.
Probably,
Not
yeah.
yet.
But it's
Recently got a UNESCO.
yeah, it's huge. You see the size of the human beings. It took maybe kind of 100 years maybe for constructing this guy. But this guy, Weigao, actually played a very important role because he was the highest military and also the civil government official in this region in the 9th century. So anyway, and here just very briefly, he referred a very talented, died young author in the 3rd century. This guy also composed kind of like a rhapsody on the parrot, a very beautiful piece, literary piece on the parrot. He copied some of his kind of like ideas and also expressions, talking about this marvelous bird from the Western region. And interestingly, this guy called Mi Hen. Mi Hen composed this piece. And then later, this piece very so famous, kind of become sort of like a masterpiece in the Chinese literary tradition, probably like Shakespeare in this country. Everyone just probably just try to read him and then follow some of his whatever word vocabulary. And the place he dedicated this piece later called the Island of Parrot. And this place was very interesting because it was kind of like a famous place for Chinese literati to compose, to compose any kind of literary piece. This is the place, where Mi's piece was inscribed. You see, there is a kind of memorial wall dedicated to this piece. So Weigao certainly was very familiar with this piece. But I show you another interesting story. There was a connection with his own love affair, actually, sort of. When he was young, and he was offered a kind of servant, sort of like or consort by his friend. And then he left. He was ordered by the emperor to fight with the Tibetan forces in southwest. So he left that region, and he didn't really take this girl with him. But this girl died very young. So and she was sort of like went to the island of the parrot for praying. So Weigao had this experience in mind, I think. This is my interpretation. That's why he used Mi Hen's piece in his commemorative inscription dedicated to this parrot. And well, of course, other sources saying that he went back to this place one day, and then he had a dream actually, and he met this girl again. It's also another kind of like a motivation for him to mention this story from the Mi Hen's piece, and also from other sources. What I'm saying is that this piece not just kind of like a commemorative inscription for the parrot, but also for his own life journey. Of course, he was trying to say, okay, I did something wrong. I didn't really return to the hometown to marry this girl, and this girl died, without my company. And then I wrote this kind of piece, and in the future, other readers might bring this up. I think this is what he wants, basically. But he kind of tried to make this kind of like concealed in this piece. only if you know this kind of illusions, then you can get the sense why he cites the similar sentences from Minhan's piece. Anyway, so but in Buddhism, this is a very typical kind of like idea called a karmic connection. Sometimes like if you have multiple lives, then you might, like today, I think sometimes you might have a flash. Okay, I went to a place for the first time, and I saw someone, or I saw some kind of a shop, a coffee shop, but you feel you probably have been here before. I'm not sure if you guys have that kind of, but if that's so, that probably means that you have previous life. you definitely came here before, but not for this life, but probably from your previous life. You have multiple lives, basically. you have been here before, but not in your current life. Because basically you are in Florida, probably you've never been to like Burma somewhere. But if you're in Burma, you recall, okay, this place was so familiar. Then you might have multiple lives. So I think Weigao was trying to talk about, okay, he still had that girl in his life anyway. So and also the historical and cultural context. I think if we look at the historical context, we can see that the parrot was so popular among the nobles and also like high-ranking officials and military officers in the Tang period in the 9th century China, in the Chinese Empire at that time. Was imported from the Western regions. Then later from the Southeast Asian kingdoms like Burma, some other small states. They try to get the protection from the Chinese Empire, against some other similar empires like Arab Empire, Tibetan Empire. All these big empires, the big powers, Turkic empires. They often contested across Asia, in Central Asia especially. Here, I just show you the map. You can see kind of like the political situation. The Tang Empire in East Asia, then in the center, there's the Tibetan Empire, then Kushan, Gandhara here, Sogdian, Turkestan, whatever, Mongolian steppe. And there are many different nomadic tribes, often take turns to rule different regions, especially in Central Asia. Afghanistan is called the graveyard of the big empires. Think about that, larger empires. And actually also like in the Chinese Central Asia, Taklamakan Desert, going beyond Dunhuang. The Tibetan Empire used to be a huge power in the 9th century. They took over the capital city of the Tang Empire. Because of the not kind of like similar like a pandemic. It's a some people categorize it as a climate change. So the economy of the empire collapsed. Then these other empires just came to get you, kind of thing. Anyway, and literary really favored parrot in the Tang Dynasty in the 9th century, 8th century. See a lot of depiction of this parrot in their art, very beautiful stuff, and so perceived by the elite class, very exotic bird, wise-talking bird. It's called a wise-talking bird, guardian of the household. It's especially a proxy for the husband in watching over his wife's fidelity. That's kind of insane, but what happened in the medieval period. Just show you, the real archaeological discoveries from the Chinese Empire in the medieval period. This is a figurine. This woman actually had a parrot hairstyle, and this pot, maybe for wine, also depicts a parrot. It might be from, it's a goat. It's kind of like gazed by goat, probably from Central Asia. We're not sure, maybe, from Turkic or Sogdiana. And anyway, some other stuff. So you can see this parrot was pretty much favored by the artists in medieval period. And religious implications, of course, the language and the body. Because the parrot can speak human language, so it can be it can recite or chant the name of the Amitabha Buddha. Amitabha Buddha is kind of like the savior in the Western paradise in Buddhist cosmology. Only those people who get saved will be welcomed by Amitabha Buddha in the paradise. But the shortcut for seeing the Amitabha Buddha, just recite his name, chant his name. Sorry, I use this word, his. But in Buddhism, enlightened beings do not have gender. Think about that. It's kind of like enlightened. But usually we use his. Only Indo-Europeans have gender. In Chinese, we don't have gender. Japanese, no. There was no he or she or whatever it. They just, the Chinese characters. Anyway, what I'm saying is that here, basically, the prayer can reach enlightenment by chanting Amitabha Buddha, the name, and also reaching enlightenment by practicing the Pure Land. It's called the Pure Land tradition, basically. I mean, Western paradise is a Pure Land in Buddhist tradition, his enlightenment was verified, or its enlightenment was verified by the remaining relics after it was cremated. As I said, only the Buddhist saints can leave relics after cremation. But if this was true or not, we don't know. There is no way to verify it by archaeology or anything else. We can only read this about from the texts. Anyway, and here is a kind of like a mixture or hybrid between Chinese culture and Buddhist culture. We got talks about that why this parrot can reach enlightenment. Even he is a bird. He is a bird. He has a bird body. And then he moved forward to explain. Well, in ancient China, some sages also kind of like half beast, half human, in terms of body. So like half bird, half human, or half whatever snake and half human, that kind of thing. Sages. Basically, he was saying that in Chinese cultural tradition, sages have animals' bodily features. So there's a kind of a connection between the Buddha and also the Chinese sages. Just show you some pictures depicting, the human whatever imaginations of ancient sages. The Chinese goddess and her whatever partner, animal tamer. His name is Animal Fuxi, but it basically means animal tamer. But they look like animals. They're half animal, half humans. They're kind of like the founding fathers of Chinese cultural tradition. Founding parents. The goddess actually was famous for repairing the heaven, because the heaven was kind of like damaged by another kind of god. So this goddess actually repaired them. You know that. It's Chinese folklore. Yeah. Right, the Chinese folklore, we discussed this.
You guys remember?
Yeah, another god is like kind of like violent and kind of bad temper guy, and he damaged the heaven. So the heaven fell down is like huge. It's kind of like the doomsday, and then this goddess helped repair it. So she was famous for that. And Fuxi, animal tamer, certainly tamed the beasts and sort of like mobilized the beasts to serve the humans' needs. Then that's why how early civilization could survive. Otherwise, if they like the Jurassic Park, if the humans can't survive, then it's done. So, and also there are other pictures showing like some also like ancient sages. They're half human, half bird. So Weigot's piece actually was trying to bring up this issue. Okay, sages are half beast, half human. So they are sages in China. Right? If the Buddha, Buddha was actually in the medieval China, Buddha was kind of like demonized by some Chinese literati as like foreigner. It's from whatever, South Asia, of course, right? It's non-Chinese, not typical Chinese. Like today, the people from like other countries, then if they look different, then some people would say, okay, this guy's not us, whatever, not one of us. They're kind of like medieval debate. So that's Weigao was trying to kind of like justify the body is not an issue, but if this being is equipped with like compassion or other virtues, righteousness and wisdom, this sentient being can reach enlightenment. So here is another wall painting also from Dunhuang, depicting like a bird. But it's kind of like a artisan, sort of like whatever, artist, heavenly artist, half bird, half human, and this bird is has a joyful voice, basically, in preaching Dharma, whatever. But of course, this is kind of like a Buddhist discourse, talking about how Buddhist teaching was great, that kind of thing, from Western paradise also. And also the Chinese sources often talk about like ancient rulers are very different in some parts of body features, like double purpose, that kind of stuff. I never met someone like that, but it's probably just kind of like discourse, whatever, right, from the Chinese historiography in the ancient time. And especially, this is very important if we look at the debate between Buddhists and the Chinese literati or Chinese thinkers in the medieval period. There are a lot of discussion like that, why Chinese people cannot accept Buddha. Because he's a foreigner, because he smells bad, or that kind of stuff. Then the Chinese Buddhist was trying to defend the Buddha. He's a sage, he's a wise man. He has wisdom, he has compassion, so we should accept Buddhism, whatever. We don't go to details, but I just show you, that a lot of sources tell us there are a lot of debates between Buddhists and non-Buddhists. So basically, Weigao took the stance. His position is like, Buddha is, Buddha can reach enlightenment. He's a human being, but even a bird can reach enlightenment. So the body is not important. Anyway, so here is the same, exotic bodies. Exotic bodies and stage and rulers. So these people are not kind of like, handsome, but they have wisdom. So they are kind of like sages or ministers with wisdom. Anyway, so parrots then kind of like portrayed as a medieval Chinese rulers. There are two cases here. It's called from medieval China. Their names were kind of like linked with a parrot. So parrot was pretty much, I think, was depicted as sort of like representatives of like wise rulers in medieval China. So anyway, this is kind of historical context. Okay. Anyway, one guy is called Gao Huan. And his name, his kind of like honorific name was very similar to the parrot in Chinese. So he was kind of like regarded as not reincarnation, but very similar to the parrot. This is this guy. And this is a wall painting from the ancient tomb of his time. Not exactly his tomb, but his time. Also from that period, and same from his reign. It's a huge funeral bed. And here also some kind of like dances and whatever from his time period, just showing you that how the Zoroastrian kind of like god, half human, half bird. This one was also from China in the 6th century. And also Zoroastrian painting from the 10th century. Anyway, and another is a Chinese only empress, Wu Zetian, called And certainly also her regime was linked with the parrot. So basically, kind of like try to say okay, the parrot was very important for the Chinese rulers. I just offer some kind of very detailed analysis, but we don't go to details. We don't have much time. Try to give some time for Q&A. Anyway, this is a Chinese first and also only empress and her empire. Anyway, and her kind of like monuments. She left a monument, a kind of tombstone without any word. That's kind of very interesting. And the court ladies in her era, anyway, also from the one of the tombs of the nobles in her period. Anyway, here, so basically, the parrot was kind of described as sort of like a bird with very good moral qualities and virtues like righteousness, compassion, wisdom. Anyway, this is a selection, a translation of his Huaiyu piece. Anyway, there are lots of issues in this piece. This is from Buddhism. I think I already mentioned a little bit. Parrot appeared as the previous life of the Buddha, and the parrot and the Buddha share the same virtue, being a king, being wise and passionate, benevolent and righteous. This is from the Jataka tale. Jataka tale means the tales, the stories of the Buddha's previous lives. So, a lot. One of the stories talking about how the Buddha actually appeared as the parrot for getting the water from the sea to extinguish the mountain white fire, that kind of stuff. And also parrot practiced filial piety, which was very important in the Chinese culture. And this is found also in Sichuan, the same place of the giant Buddha. So, and also the texts, the fragments. Earlier I mentioned that this is one of the texts in both Chinese and also Sogdian, East Asia and Central Asia. So, and this is from the let's say, the 11th century ancient tomb, showing that the town court concubine actually taught a parrot to recite the Buddhist sutra. This is from 1,000 years ago, 1,200 years ago maybe. But showing how the parrot can be trained to read Buddhist texts. Anyway, I stop here, and still have some time. You can ask me any questions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know in the Bible, when they're talking about Leviathan, they think that a lot was lost in translation. It's not actually talking about a giant sea serpent. How do you think that may have affected the views of parrots in Buddhist religion?
Yeah, you remember I mentioned that how the Chinese writers actually linked the parrot Chinese name and also the title of the Chinese empress. I think in the ancient time, many texts or translations intentionally distorted the original text, or they not just distort. I would not use that word, but sort of like modified a little bit to kind of like serve as a rhetoric, persuade the audience in a different culture to accept the idea, and that often happens in Buddhist texts. And I think some kind of like contents, as far as I know, reflect sort of like India, we call it Indo-centric worldview, and then the Chinese translators actually often modified as like Sino-centric worldview. So for example, like a lot of Buddhist texts talking about like the world, the 4 continents of the world, but they often studied from the south. South Asia, Sumer, the mountain, the highest mountain, South Asia was sort of like in the south. But in the Chinese translation, then the east became the most important direction. Certainly it's kind of a Chinese modification, I think, because the Chinese translators try to serve the Chinese audience. They try to fit the needs of the Chinese audience readers, that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm not sure about the biblical tradition, but of course, the Bible is translated into so many different languages. But I think every culture has a different kind of like thinking or their so-called kind of accepted knowledge from the tradition. So they try to figure out how to understand it. Yeah. But for scholars, we try to recover what happened, what really happened, or especially like philologists. In the past, philologists often try to reconstruct, the original text. So, and then we realized, okay, translators modified it. I would say not much. Yeah, not much today. Yeah, in the past, now probably, of course, nowadays it's easier to get it. That word not good, but to access it for a lot of people. But not like in the medieval period, only the noble class can really see it. Nowadays, not much. But on the other hand, also I think there are a lot of other rules or whatever city code prevent a lot of people from processing it or whatever. But as far as I know, in China, only 3 species of parrot were allowed to trade, say, whatever, yeah, or transfer, that kind of thing. But usually not, a lot of animals were not allowed to trade. Yeah, you can't buy it. So that's what I know. Yeah, there are kind of like 5 or 8 different species of parrots, I think, across Asia, maybe. Not sure about the world. Yeah.
Like I noticed that there were a lot of artifacts and there was paintings involving parrots. Would you say that just like artifacts and paintings are they more important than say just like text when it comes to understanding the importance of parrots and religion?
Not really, I would say. I think texts are more interesting. Well, I'm not trained as an image reader, not an art historian, but texts certainly often deliver kind of like multi-layer information, because including where is the port, where this port was produced, like the one I show you guys, is kind of gold, decorated with the gold, made from Central Asia, or at least the style was not from Central China, and also other images. Sometimes we might find Dionysius, the god of wine, in some artifacts discovered in China. So they are kind of like a Greek, Gandhari, from Afghanistan, or Persian, or Turkic, Sogdian, different styles mixed together. Because in medieval China, the Tang Empire is a huge empire. So the Arabs, merchants, all these people, they came for trade, whatever. So, and they brought a lot of stuff. Yeah. The texts are quite different. As I said, also we found the texts in many different languages. So some texts probably not well circulated, I would say. But Chinese text certainly was more probably, I think, maybe broad in terms of the readership in the medieval period. Yeah. But they're kind of also diverse. We have to think about different regions. I think the different regions in China at that time in the 9th century, 10th century probably have very different knowledge about the parrot, if they were from either South Asia or Southeast Asia. So, and the different colors also. Yeah.
I just want to jump in and say Dr. Chen is the handful of few scholars who can decode Sigolian, right?
Huh?
Finland.
Cantonese. No,
language.
I read
archaeological research.
some older languages. Yeah.
Yeah, he can decipher older. Therefore, it's very valuable because not a lot of modern scholars cannot comprehend all the ancient scripts.
I found this lecture very interesting as well because I grew up learning both Hindu and Buddhist texts and just the religion as a whole. I noticed that, again, one very prominent thing was in these religions, animals are considered to be sacred and are revered, and therefore that affects the diet of people who practice very much so.
Right.
Like most of the people in my family are vegetarians.
Yeah.
That didn't stick with me, unfortunately, so I know my chances of reincarnation as something dropping every time I have a burger. But like, to what extent do these beliefs like influence like the modern day diet of people? Because I can say for sure South Asia predominantly
Yeah.
vegetarian.
Yeah, there are a lot. Yeah, there are a lot of people. I think nowadays they try to sort of like revitalize this ancient wisdom to justify their vegetarianism. Yeah, nowadays. Yeah,
My parents do.
right. As I said, because in reincarnation sense, you can think about maybe the dead animal, or even you don't witness it, the death moment, or whatever. But if you have that kind of thinking, then you probably won't eat meat at all. Yeah, you won't consume any meat at all. Yeah, but in early Buddhism, I would say vegetarianism was not sort of like the core value of Buddhism, because the Buddha himself actually ate meat. he might pass away because he probably. I'm not sure. Maybe consume some sort of like bad meat. I think there's some kind of theory, but we're not sure. But certainly, the first principle in Buddhism is no killing, no taking life. Yeah. So it's kind of like a foundation, I think, for a lot of whatever cultural traditions of vegetarianism. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Very glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.